Welcome to the 10th anniversary of REIMAGINE 2021. Presented by Mousebelt. Coming up next.
Welcome back to Reimagine 21. I'm your host, Yonah Hochhauser, and today I'm honored to be joined by Leslie Lamb, Head of Partnerships at Amber Group and the host of the Crypto Unstacked podcast. Leslie, thanks so much for joining us.
Yonah, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you. Clearly, this is not your first talk over the internet discussing the topic, but I'm very excited to have this conversation with you, and I know our viewers are too. So, first off, to jump into it, you want to give us a little background, kind of who you are and how you got into blockchain?
Sure. So my crypto journey started back in 2012, actually, when I was in Berlin, Germany. And at that time, really, there was only one cryptocurrency to speak of, right? Bitcoin, primarily. We didn't have Ethereum and sort of the long tail of assets that we see now. But Germany was dubbed the Bitcoin capital very, very early on. And there is a district in Berlin that I remember called Kreuzberg, which is filled with cafes and bars. And I remember hearing about this name, Jörg Platzer. Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong, but he was a founder of this bar called Room 77, which was one of the first bars in the world to accept Bitcoin as payment. So that was really cool. And then a year later, actually, in 2013, I went back to Germany, but this time to Hamburg. So it was sort of the south side of Germany, and was focusing more or less on researching something for an urban planning project that I was a part of. And really the focus of this research was about the emergence of new money systems, right? And sustaining local economies. And I was trying to look at this one specific place in Hamburg called Williamsburg. And basically in a nutshell, I looked at the emergence of various experimental money systems like local currencies, as well as more on the international level with these mobile money systems like M-Pesa, for example, in Africa. And really this was the time, right? In 2013, this was the time when a company called BitPesa was just launching their crypto services in Africa. And so they were one of the first companies that I spoke with on the crypto side. During this time, I was also experimenting with wallets such as blockchain.info, which is now blockchain.com wallet. I started playing around with Coinbase sort of during their first, early iterations of that wallet interface. So kind of over the years, I've seen a lot of market cycles, crypto market cycles. And it's been really interesting to see the narrative of Bitcoin kind of just transform from a means of payment narrative to now being primarily a store of value, right? Being championed by Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey, right? They were on an interview together for the B Word conference with Cathie Wood recently. So this was kind of unimaginable back then. And ultimately, I started my career in private banking, but I've always kind of paid close attention to crypto and really didn't come around to crypto full time job-wise until I moved to Hong Kong, where I'm based now. And I joined Amber Group in 2019. And pretty much since early 2020, I've been running a crypto education podcast, as you mentioned, called Crypto Unstacked, which explores sort of all things crypto finance. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, how I got into crypto.
Well, it's always so exciting and interesting speaking to people who first heard about it and started getting into it back in those earlier days, like you mentioned, when it was more a means of transaction and not yet fully thought of as this all-purpose store of value. It's interesting. People would go to bars and they would leave tips in Bitcoin, and not just like, one Satoshi. They would leave like a 2 Bitcoin tip, because at the time that wasn't the craziest thing in terms of value. So how was that for you, kind of living that experience where your first exposure to Bitcoin, whereas today, when you're educating the youth that are coming up and hearing about crypto, where they see these crazy high valuations and they say, ooh, I could put some money in Bitcoin and sell it later and get rich. Whereas back then it wasn't really thought like that. How was that experience, living through that transitional period for Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. One of the first beers that I bought was with Bitcoin. This was in middle of nowhere London, really, but it was a small little bar, I remember, and they had this QR code right by the tap. And people were just kind of hanging out for one of these casual Bitcoin meetups, and I thought, wow, really, if Bitcoin is going to challenge the fiat system, it's going to start by mass adoption of Bitcoin and having people understand how to use, mobile payments, right? Because it wasn't very, very popular back then to be, paying for things via QR code. Whereas now with the whole COVID thing, things becoming more digital, it definitely is becoming more popular to pay, by Apple Pay and QR codes. And so I thought, wow, Bitcoin can really just make this experience so much easier, right? Not needing to take out cash. And having that comparison early on was really mind-blowing. But I didn't know that Bitcoin was going to turn into this whole ecosystem sort of beyond the initial technologists and sort of outsiders like me, right, who got pulled in because of the technologists. But it was really always about the utility of Bitcoin, and now it's kind of taken on another life that's been driven primarily by speculation. And I don't think that's a problem. I think any asset worth looking at is probably going to start with a more speculative narrative, especially when more and more eyeballs are on it. And for me, it took many years for me to really understand the investability of Bitcoin beyond kind of just using it as a means of payment, and kind of when Bitcoin Cash started to take off a little bit after the fork. I thought, wow, okay, this is kind of returning back to the original view that Satoshi had for Bitcoin itself, right? For it to be used as micropayments. So I'm not advocating for one or the other here. It's just an interesting observation that I've had, and kind of taking a look back, it almost seems nostalgic, not really thinking about Bitcoin in the 30, 40, 60, punching up to let's call it $100,000 range, but really just couple $70, $100, and kind of just using it one-off in experimental ways to purchase things. Like that was really, really exciting for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think a way that people could who got in too late, who got in, or not too late to understand that idea of Bitcoin as a transactionary asset. I think we're starting to see that a little bit with NFTs, or people could experience that with NFTs, because NFTs right now, or I mean, listen, going back to the crypto kitties days, that was that was all fad. But if we're looking at this latest NFT kind of run, where right now it does seem to be in that speculatory stage where you're seeing these crazy valuations of art, and it seems to be mostly used for art. But I do believe that NFTs have the potential to play a much bigger role and a much more utilitarian role, or have a lot more utility in terms of revolutionizing how we own assets, and not merely just as, let me sell this piece of art for $60 million. What role do you see NFTs playing, not necessarily today, but 5 or 10 years from now?
I think very, very simply, it's unlocking the value of otherwise illiquid assets, right? Making these very illiquid assets productive assets for the very first time. And ultimately, that's what we're going to see when NFTs sort of merge more and more with finance itself, right? The financialization of NFTs is sort of the next stage that we're going to get to once we have a really good idea of, the basics, right? What are NFTs? What are the use cases? What are the different types of NFTs? These are sort of the basic questions that people are asking now, right? And it will take some time before I think the market kind of comes back to NFTs as sort of, a narrative, really, because, we've kind of seen the market come down a bit, right? So the market's cooled down. And so probably people who are in it for the money have left. But still, if we look at objectively speaking, sale activity, there's been $2.5 billion in sales so far this year. And that's pretty remarkable for a fringe part of the crypto ecosystem. Maybe you want to call it a asset class, right? Just how crypto, for example, took many years before it became an investable asset class. Just like how Bitcoin, for example, took many, many years before it became an investable asset that now public companies want to be allocating part of their treasury to. We're sort of seeing NFTs at the boon of this narrative as well. But if we pull back a bit, NFTs really are these unique digital assets that enable traditional physical assets to be represented in truly a unique digital way, right, on the blockchain. And to your point, for the first time, we're seeing ownership and provenance becoming verifiable and trackable on the blockchain. And when you add this layer of programmable scarcity, on top of that, it really opens up the design space for what is possible for the creator, right? So kind of making creators rethink the concept of ownership and monetization is a very, very empowering thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's expand upon that a little bit, because that does remind me a little bit of the CreatorFi mission. You want to go a little bit about kind of what is CreatorFi?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from a macro perspective, NFTs are part of this wave of financialization or financializing internet culture, right? And I think NFTs represent the democratization of culture, perhaps. There's that phrase has been thrown around quite a bit, but I think it's so true. It's making culture investable for everyone. So as we see NFTs kind of merge the social with finance, we're kind of seeing how culture is changing and how that is affecting behavior in the way that people do things, right? Investing or trading, financing, all of these different things. And going back to my point earlier about how NFTs can make liquid assets productive assets, that's what we're seeing NFTs being able to do for creators for the first time. And so I think, largely speaking, with the NFT narrative, a lot of it has been focused just on the creators, really. Whereas I think it's important to understand who all the participants are in the NFT ecosystem, right? And so that's why we at Amber Group wanted to launch this CreatorFi movement, which stands for Creator Finance. We want to empower creators to not only plan, but thrive in their NFT journey, right, and become successful with their finances. And so this piece of finance, of financial planning, is so important to any NFT creator's journey, because it's not like once you try to leverage an NFT platform and you NFT your artwork, all of a sudden somehow you start to monetize in crazy ways and everyone becomes a millionaire. It's not like that, right? It's a really hard journey for most if you're not already coming into this NFT world as an established artist, an established creator. You don't have a very big fan base, right? It's really, really difficult to break into if you're not really planning your way through that journey. And so really what Amber wants to do is to kind of bridge these conversations between creators and collectors and even the marketplaces in the NFT ecosystem to make sure that we're helping to educate these NFT creators by engaging crypto finance content. So if you go on our Crypto Unstacked YouTube channel, you'll see that we have a whole collection of videos produced to talk about this element of money management for creators. And then for, the collectors or platforms, we've kind of been working really hard to figure out how to provide an end-to-end service, a crypto finance service, to facilitate that financial journey. Right, there are many components, to this whole NFT process. So I'll pause there for now. But broadly speaking, that's how we're approaching this Creator 5 movement, trying to address all of the participants in the NFT ecosystem and kind of giving attention to, NFT questions that a lot of other people are not asking at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, when we're talking about the creators in the traditional space, if we're talking about, let's say there's the Hollywood creators, and I'm throwing in there movies and TV shows for the streaming services and the traditional stations. And then there's the more semi-pro, amateur user created content that we're seeing on platforms like YouTube, TikTok, et cetera, and the kind of social media ones. And what we've seen so far, in especially the past 10 years, is this really explosion in the amount of creators who are making a living, and a pretty good living, on these user-generated content. And so what role can you see NFTs? Like you said, there's this new avenue for creators, not only to have their content, but this kind of creator finance. What roles can you see NFTs playing in this world? Will these kind of future creators powered by their abilities to NFT or tokenize their content, we see that kind of merging with the current platforms like YouTube and TikTok, or will this take place in their own separate kind of world and platforms that are specifically tailored for this new NFT economy?
I think NFTs are really going to introduce a new way of allowing fans to give certain types of access to their fans via these platforms, right? So I don't think NFTs are necessarily going to overtake these third-party platforms like YouTube or TikTok, for example, right? I think those platforms are where creators are currently. So when you think about critical mass and how to get that attention across, ultimately, as of this point, these platforms are really where that sort of attention economy is living. So you think just think of NFTs as a utility to kind of open up the gates for creators to engage with their audiences, right? I think that's a complementary way of looking at it. I interviewed Justin Blau recently on the Crypto Unstacked podcast. For those who aren't familiar, he is a really well-known DJ and music producer, and kind of has gotten into the crypto world over the past few years as an investor, and now an NFT creator and collector. And really for him, it was really eye-opening to understand how he can use NFTs to give rights, musical rights to his fans, people who have been supporting him for a very long time, or even just new fans, new supporters. And he's just been experimenting with ways to incentivize his loyal supporters, right? And so I think that's where it's going to be very interesting. How can creators leverage NFTs to enable access to exclusive drops, exclusive experiences, right? Maybe Yonah, for example, if you were to create an NFT for any reason, something that you might embed in there is access to, conversing with you on a one-on-one for a specific topic, right? That maybe very well and few others do. So people look to you as an expert. And so, they can access you in this way. So there are a whole bunch of things you can do with NFTs, but I think now the focus for a lot of creators is, how they can use NFTs to unlock new ways of access.
Well, right now we're having that one-on-one conversation. I hope that NFT you purchased to make this happen is worth it. Maybe we'll make one and we'll sell it for charity. But you mentioned this critical mass, this idea of creators allowing access to unique experiences, content, and this critical mass. With critical mass is it's tough to get. It either comes, for instance, by price speculation and everyone FOMOing in, or it comes because something's cheaper, better, faster, and that's how new technologies really overtake old technologies because they're cheaper, better, faster, and superior. In recent days, an NFT story that has made some headlines is this a new cartoon show that's going to be with Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis, and Vitalik. I'm not sure you heard about this, Stoner Cats. Are you familiar with this?
Yes. I'm not familiar, but I clicked on it because I was like, wait a minute, Ashton Kutcher is getting into the NFT game. This is interesting.
Yeah, so I'll give you the basic premise. Essentially, a couple of days ago, Ashton Kutcher dropped a video, I think it was on Twitter or TikTok, of him asking his wife Mila about different various blockchains. Hey Mila, what's Bitcoin? What's Ethereum? And eventually, towards the end of the video, he swings the camera over, and Vitalik's there in his kitchen explaining what's an NFT or what's Ethereum. And what's the point? This was a promo. They are making a cartoon show called Stoner Cats that you will only be able to watch if you buy the NFT. And really, that's kind of the only thing of interest here is this NFT aspect. Otherwise, it's just a new comedy show by Ashton and Mila. But Vitalik will be voicing one of the cats, apparently. But the thing that was interesting is that you need to buy this NFT to watch it. Do you foresee this being kind of a new kind of business model where the purchase of the NFT, not just in the sense of ownership, but in the sense of, hey, these NFTs will serve as kind of your ticket for entries to whether it be real life events or kind of consuming a content like it is there?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, by the way, for this construction noise, which is happening upstairs. So hopefully it's not bothering you too much.
I can barely hear anything.
Okay, great. So yeah, I think, access to premium content is going to be a huge thing, especially when, now, right, creators can, who have historically maybe taken one specific role. So for many years, Ashton Kutcher was very focused on perhaps being an actor, right? But over the years, he's turned into an entrepreneur, an investor, right? And now I guess he's getting kind of into the production game as well and kind of utilizing NFTs to make, creative content and stuff. And I think, look, it makes total sense. It makes total sense. I know I haven't looked too closely into it, but there's no reason why I wouldn't want to try it, right? Because the whole point is to democratize access to media content. Whereas before, perhaps it was the way to go was to, gate content, right? You have to be a subscriber to HBO, for example, right? A subscriber to Netflix. Now, Netflix is probably not as expensive as, some type of bundles there for media. But, the difficulty with that is you're not really incentivized in any way, like as a subscriber. All you get is content, right? So that's not really incentive. That might be, okay, maybe incentive, like there are exclusive movies that you can't watch anywhere else that you can watch on HBO, and that's why you subscribe. Okay, I understand that. But, why don't we have another way to incentivize viewers and loyal viewers? And I think that's what Ashton probably wants to experiment with, right? Is maybe, for certain holders of NFTs, might be limited editions or maybe just early NFT holders. These guys maybe get to participate in the script writing for the future episodes, right? Or maybe one lucky winner from an NFT auction can actually be featured in one of the Stoner Cat video series. And so it's about that participation, right? Engaging audiences and not just kind of pushing content out there and assuming, consumption is king and that's what's going to bring you sort of, like any type of engagement, but rather saying, from the very beginning, how can we build up the community around this brand, right? Increase the brand equity with our community, right? And with our audience. And that's what, a lot of people are saying when it comes to publicly traded companies as well. Jeff Dorman and the guys from Arca have made this example for where if you're an Amazon Prime user, imagine, how they could have incentivized early Prime users from the very beginning, where if you happen to hold a stock, for example, of Amazon, you got 1 year's worth of Prime membership free, or 2 years worth, whatever it might be, right? Or certain discounts on items for a certain period of time. Like, why couldn't it be the case that if you're a shareholder of a publicly traded company, that you also got benefits from being a shareholder, since you are technically contributing to, the growth of the company, right? So why couldn't you have a share in future profits, outside of just holding the stock? And I think that's what we might kind of get into over time, is the merging of NFTs, the merging of various channels of incentivization, to increase the engagement between companies and shareholders. Which honestly, there hasn't been a lot of innovation around that just yet. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about incentivization, what we've seen time and time again, whether you think it's for better or the worse, the biggest incentive is money making. Is that speculation? Is the idea of that return on investment? So far, I've really spoken about the creative side of creator finance in terms of fan engagement, being able to dictate and maybe have a say in how the scripts are written, or the power that the creator has over the content. But how about the finance side? Traditionally, if we're looking, the Hollywood producer, the famous Hollywood producer would invest in a movie and would come out, if that movie was successful, would come out a rich man, a powerful guy or girl in the Hollywood space. With NFTs and with the creative finance, what's the finance part of that? Is this going to enable kind of, and we could say democratize and open up to anyone who has the desire, the ability to kind of invest in the success of a content?
So I think the finance piece refers to creator economics, which is kind of a new branch of this sort of merging of finance and the growing creator economy. Something that we came up with for one of our Creator 5 videos is the idea of creator capital allocation. And so we, are in talking to creators, we basically said that, there are basically 3 things that you can do with your proceeds from NFT sales. One, you can reinvest in the business, right? You can buy more tools and equipment. You can hire more people to join your team so that you can create more work and experiment with new projects. So that's number 1, reinvest in your business. Number 2 is you can, use the proceeds to pay down a debt, right? Any expenses that you have. So if you look at NFTs as just another income stream, you can definitely use those proceeds to pay down expenses. Number 3 is where we sort of merge more into the crypto finance side of things, which is these creators now, if they are so inclined, they can start a crypto portfolio and diversify their proceeds beyond fiat, right? So the reality is a lot of creators right now are just trying to figure out how to make money with NFTs. So if they don't want to take on that market exposure, then it's quite natural for them to figure out where to convert their crypto into cash, for example, fiat or stable coins. But there's a whole nother, perhaps side of the creator, community who says, hey, look, I am really excited about crypto. I really want to be part of this revolution. I want to understand what it means to invest in crypto and how to do that. Right. And so that's kind of where the crypto finance education side, independent of creator finance, really has to sort of meet the crypto newcomers, I don't want to say late adopters, because it's definitely not late yet, but the current adopters of crypto, is to sort of meet their understanding of what or how they want to be building out their crypto portfolio, and kind of walking them through that process of what products can they invest in, what tools are out there. And that's where actually being a crypto finance company comes in handy, right? Because that is our bread and butter, right? Amber Group is an integrated crypto finance firm that works with both institutions and retail investors across trading, asset management, and financing. So for us, we really do see the broad range of crypto investors, and we can tailor, right, our offerings to meet the needs of these various investors. So that's why we think this merging of the two, creator and finance, really is like match made in heaven. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's a very exciting time to be alive. As you mentioned, we're not even we speak about it like, oh, late adopters, like we're still so early.
We're so
in this
early.
technology. So
Yeah.
early. It's crazy. I mean, whether looking at blockchain or cryptocurrencies or specifically NFTs, I mean, as you go along the way, it just, everything is so new. Even DeFi, it's so new. I don't think we've even scratched the surface of the potential of DAOs yet either, which at this point, because the DeFi has essentially become just an excuse to launch a governance token so that you can launch a token. That's neither here nor there. But I mean, so when we're talking about education, I think the one of the biggest struggles is that how do you create a curriculum? How do you create education when the thing that you're trying to educate about, the topic, is so constantly evolving? I mean, if you would have wrote, kind of curriculum about DeFi last summer, DeFi looks completely different now. And then now there's also NFTs. And then, so how can you educate when the second that you say and you teach it, it's immediately outdated?
Yeah. That's a very, very good question. I think all content creators out there, yourself including, right, for being on the sort of hosting side as a podcaster and having been through so many interviews, I think it's important to understand that everyone is somewhere in their crypto education journey. So it's not that whatever you say just immediately becomes outdated because there's so much going on in the space. I think rather you can think of it this way, where you might be talking about something one day, which to the someone who is really keeping on crypto day after day after day, for them, okay, fine, that might be old news. But for someone coming in, right, and just trying to get their bearings on where to start, they'll get to that topic eventually, right? And to them, even if it were something that happened, 1-2 years ago, for them it's new because they've never read about it before, perhaps, right? They never engaged with that type of content. It's just like, for example, the white paper for Bitcoin. Sure, Bitcoin has taken on a very, very different beast now compared to the content written in the white paper. But does that mean it's outdated and it's irrelevant and any new person coming in shouldn't read the white paper? No, right? It just means that was what was written at one point in time by the creator of Bitcoin based on how he saw the world going and based on what he created, right? And technology-wise, what he thought was possible and why he felt Bitcoin was going to be very important as an alternative means of money, right? And so if anything, the quote unquote outdated information can be used to help people question the overarching picture of something like, what is money, right? How should I think about the monetary system? And those topics are evergreen, right? Those are definitely not outdated. So that's what gives me comfort when I put out a video like Intro to DeFi Primer, right? Part 1, Part 2. I mean, if you're in crypto now and you've been in DeFi, you've gone through DeFi summer, you watch that and you're like, wow, this is such old news. But to an NFT creator who's just learning about crypto through NFTs, that stuff can be actually very helpful, because for them, it is giving them like a very big picture, giving them some direction of what to look at potentially, and just kind of be used as a guiding post, right? As opposed to this is your Bible for all things DeFi, So when you kind of think about it in that context, it, might give you a bit more comfort as a content creator. I don't know. That's what I think. Yeah. What about you? Like, do you have specific thoughts? Because you're a creator yourself.
Well, I mean, I do. I think it's very interesting, because if you look historically, let's say before the internet, the power, and this is something you mentioned before, is kind of gatekeepers and the gating of content. Before the internet, the power for the content really was in the hands of the gatekeepers, because as a content creator, your only opportunity to actually get your content out was by getting a TV station to either show it, a theater venue to let you have a stage, a newspaper to actually write your article. So the power really was with the gatekeepers before the internet. Once the internet came on, the power dynamics kind of really leveled a bit. So now it's easier now as a content creator to get your content out. You could use YouTube and TikTok, but it's not fully even, because at the end of the day, they can deplatform you if they'd like. The revenue share, let's say, isn't always the most fair for the content creators. But now, with the potential for NFTs, or the potential of NFTs, I do think that we're finally starting to see that balance between gatekeeper and content creator finally start tipping more heavily into the hands of the content creator, because it's with NFTs, it's so easy and clear to be, and let's say the instruments of being able to monetize and maintain your IP of what you created,
right?
It is endless, and so I do think that's a very exciting time for content creators. But how about you? Do you have a podcast? Are you thinking about different ways to NFT your podcast?
That's been on my mind for some time. I know some people have done it. They've minted NFTs for a few episodes. And for me, it's always about audience building. Like, how does that work? Right? It's a very big picture, and some people are really good at doing that. But for something like podcasting, a challenge that I've always felt with podcasting is that it's very one way. It is just push, and for the end consumer, it's you listen to it whenever you want to, right? No one's telling you which episode to tune into. It's something that you fully opt into as a consumer. So from that end, it's kind of a very passive experience, right? Whereas if we're talking about engagement, I mentioned earlier how companies need to figure out new ways, more interactive ways of engaging with their shareholders. I think for content creators, it's the same thing with listeners. Trying to figure out, how do I incentivize you? How do I reward you for giving me mind share, right? I understand you're busy. I understand there are multiple platforms out there that you can be exploring, and content that you can be reading or listening or watching. Yet you are spending time here with me, listening to what I have to say, what my guests have to say. So I want to thank you for that. How do I do that besides just saying it and tweeting about it, right? So that's where, going back to my point about access, like that's what I want to figure out. It's if I'm going to be minting an NFT, I don't just want to mint it for the sake of minting, because all of that costs money, right? And for the potential buyer or collector of this NFT, it has to mean something. I can't just mint it and still have the episode online, can I don't know, right? or maybe I mint it and I quote unquote burn an episode from my library online, but the conversation lives on with the collector. And maybe, I have I work at a special engagement where the collector would be able to speak directly or meet the guest in person, perhaps, or with the three of us, right? And we have a really exciting conversation around that, or we plan a really interesting, side event at a conference, right? I mean, there's so many different ways you can leverage NFTs as a podcaster, I can imagine. But it has to start with purpose. Why am I doing this? Not just, I'm not doing just because everyone else is doing this. So I haven't figured that part out yet, but this is kickstarting me again to think about that. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, this is something you mentioned earlier on, this idea of NFTs have the potential to really change and take illiquid assets and make them way more liquid. And one thing we've been talking about again and again in this conversation is content. But content has historically, and especially with the internet, been quite easily moved. Maybe not the ownership, but easily consumed. I mean, my issue with the art NFTs is that why would I pay $1 million for a GIF when the GIF is already out there for everyone? I don't need to own that GIF. I'm fine. I'm not speculating. If I just want to consume, I don't need the NFT to consume it. And so I do think that a lot of the power of NFTs does lie in these more illiquid assets. A real estate, which is historically illiquid, could really be revolutionized by NFTs. I mean, things of that nature. We're talking about things on a bigger scale of physical things that can't just be, instantly downloaded simultaneously by the whole world. Not saying that NFTs don't have a place there, but this idea of ownership of assets that historically kind of couldn't be owned easily or exchanged hands easily, that's what excites me. Do you see NFTs having a role, let's say in an offline space, in a kind of not digital online space?
I actually think, if I'm taking your example of real estate, I think we're just seeing the tokenization narrative play out there, and not yet with NFTs. So tokenization, meaning, with the whole security token evolution that has yet to take off yet, but it is with the more robust infrastructure, right? Issuance platforms like Securitize, I just had them on the pod as well, who now have the licenses to be doing what they want to be doing. And so it's kind of just taking off from just a tokenization or a fractionalization, way. And it's still very, very far, I think, from NFTs. I think where NFTs actually could be useful on the real estate side is if that same real estate were replicated in a metaverse. And there is some connection between the offline and the online world where, as I don't know, lessee of a unit, maybe, this building lives in the metaverse in some way, and is living on a very valuable plot of land in said metaverse, and you as a tenant in this building, were earning fees, being, I don't know, holding an NFT, right? Because the land in that metaverse is growing in value because there's a growing digital economy, in there. And, not only is there residential building, but also commercial activity going on, right? It's like, that is maybe where the relationship might go, but it's still a stretch, to be honest. Right now, I think it's just real world tokenization of real estate that still needs to kind of play out before we kind of see NFTs really disrupt the way that people invest in NFT in real estate specifically.
Well, listen, the metaverse might not be as far off as you think. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has been really pushing this metaverse narrative. He says that in the near future, or in the future, not sure how near, hope not too near, but he says that Facebook's going to go from a social media company to a quote metaverse company, seemingly, and they've been investing heavily in VR headsets and technology as well. So, I mean, I do see Facebook really taking that angle, and Facebook being that big push where kind of like in the movies that we grew up on, where you kind of live in this virtual world. And like you mentioned, that's really where the NFT real estate comes into play, where when everything is digital, when you're living in a digital world, literally in the headset, that's when everything that in the real world and in our physical world, you wouldn't even think would need ownership. Like this cup that I have, it's mine. I own it just by it being here. But once you're in the digital metaverse, you need to have a digital ownership of that. There needs to be a NFT or something equivalent to signify that that cup, which isn't physically in my hands, is actually owned to me. And I think that's really where, at least in that space, where this kind of digital ownership in NFTs will blow up. But we are slowly running out of time. So I just want to pick your brain one last time. There's a lot of students and kind of university students and even younger people out there watching this, interested in the blockchain space, NFTs, all this really exciting new technology. What advice would you give to someone who's interested in this stuff? Maybe they're a creator already, not connected with the crypto space. What kind of advice would you give them, now that there are these all new opportunities available for them that they might not be familiar with?
Yeah, I'll anchor it to the concept of financial planning. None of this is financial advice, but I think financial planning is one of the most powerful things that you can do as you grow in your career. And crypto finance is, democratizing that whole journey, right? And it's making investing fun again. I think that's what people might miss. They're like, oh, okay, prices are down for Bitcoin, yada yada. They focus so much on just price sentiment and price movement, but ultimately, like, crypto is making investing fun. It's making investing playable. We're seeing that with NFTs and sort of this GameFi economy, right? With play to earn, people making a real living, monthly income by playing these sort of blockchain games, which we don't have time to get into today, but we're seeing the merging of real world economics and kind of this digital world economics, right? But the whole point of really focusing on financial planning early is because you give yourself the optionality to determine, how you want your future to play out, right? Financial planning enables freedom to think about, what you want to be doing in 5 years, right? What you want to be doing in 10 years. And crypto really enables that by lowering the barriers to entry to invest and to trade. And so kind of tying this, to one of our missions at Amber, it's always been about making things easier for users looking to get into crypto, right? Whether that be trading or investing, right? Earning interest on your crypto holdings, which is a very, very big theme, right? Sort of yield capture in the crypto finance economy has been very hot so far. And so we think this entire process should be very easy and intuitive. So, perhaps there are Gen Zers listening or watching this video. Think about the word customization, right? We're in the 21st century right now. We're living in an age of customization where you can customize anything that you want to buy, right? Those cool sneakers, cars, right? Clothes, all this stuff. And, we really care about tailoring these personal items to our liking, right? So why shouldn't this apply to your crypto portfolio? Why shouldn't you think about your finances in that very same way of demanding transparency from the financial service providers that you work with, right? Really understanding what products that they offer you. And so what Amber, likes to say is we offer optionality, right? And that optionality is transparency. We want you to invest on your own terms, not because we said you can only invest in products that are 30 days, 60-day, and 90-day tenors, right? We say based on your risk appetite, based on your liquidity preference, you should be able to determine what your interest saving account looks like, right? And so, there are so many different ways that we can talk about, how we think about strategizing our product development, but it really all comes down to how do we make things relatable to newcomers coming in, and if you can think about it this way of just customization of finances and how crypto finance can really enable you to take ownership of your finance, that's going to be really, really powerful. Yeah.
Wow, Leslie, hearing you speak to Gen Zs about crypto and about even financial planning, which is I would say historically maybe a boring topic for the youth, made me understand why it's called the Amber Group, because it was lit. Leslie, thank you so much for joining us. It was really so much fun speaking to you. I really appreciate the insights and this unique topic of creator finance, which this is the first time I'm hearing about it. Gets me just another avenue to get excited about in the blockchain space. So Leslie, thanks so much for joining us. For all viewers, check out our podcast, Crypto Unstacked podcast, and she is at the Amber Group. Leslie, it was an honor. And for all of our viewers here at Reimagine 21, I'm Yonah Hochhauser. Thanks so much for watching.
Appreciate it, Yonah.